Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene. And today we're going to talk about RPG rules and how you learn to play a game.
Yes.
Maybe, if Saul can read his own writing.
So I think we are in a golden era of RPGs.
A golden era?
Golden era.
Are you sure it's not a silver era?
No, it's golden. So the reason I say this is because I think RPG rules, in a certain sense, have really become a
art form?
Yes. And people who are really good at it are being so correct. I think we are in a golden era because you're right. RPG writing has become a art form and a skill that is been honed over years and years and years of people seeing how rules are written and being kind of like dismayed, going, God damn, these rules are hard to understand.
Rules are hard to understand, whether it's a board game or an RPG. The rules are very important the way they're written and learning them because people need to know what they're doing, right? And it's hard if the rules are convoluted. So they have become more streamlined.
Exactly. I mean, and this is in every aspect of rules writing, whether it's rules for a board game or rules for a sport. You know, if you're trying to write the rules of football or whatever it is, being able to, and especially an RPG, because sometimes it's a little bit more complicated instead of a sport or even a board game. Writing rules is an art form. You're right, and people, because they've had all this history of RPGs, that they can look at hundreds of RPGs and see how they're written. They can see and figure out, well, this didn't really work well in this instance, or this didn't make sense. So because we are 40 to almost 50 years into D&D, we have all this history of RPGs now, this huge catalog of RPGs that have been written. And because of that,
I didn't like the way that rule was written, so I'm going to do it this way.
And or it was too convoluted, or it didn't make too much sense, or the terminology was kind of weird.
So your party gets a new game, or you start playing an old game.
Right.
I'm going to give you two examples. One, Traveler. I don't understand the rules. I created a character for that, and it died. And I created another character, and then it took me 3 gaming sessions to figure out what I was supposed to roll. And you're only rolling 2d6, but I didn't understand that you were trying to get an 8 because I didn't remember reading that. I think Philip had to tell me like 3 times that what it was I was trying to do with my roll.
And that's those 3 little books, much like D&D, the 3 little books of Traveler. They call it the 3 little black books. They were written in the mid 70s, let's say.
And I'm telling you that Augustine and I read those rules to create our characters like 6 times, and both of us just looked at each other going, he goes, I think we're going to have to wait for Dad because I don't understand what it's saying. So how the rules are written is very important.
But he's pretty good at reading rules, right? He started reading Pathfinder.
Pathfinder was his thing. So
when he was a little kid, I mean, he was 7 or 8 when he started reading Pathfinder and
he was in first grade.
Oh, first grade. Okay, even younger. 6. And so when we were playing Pathfinder, he became quite the rules aficionado. And later on, when Pathfinder was definitely our bag, and I was running that, and I was perfectly happy. Somebody gave me a D&D Player's Handbook for my birthday.
5th edition.
And
to which Saul stuck it into the shelf and
said, it was funny because I don't remember even sticking it on the shelf. I just left it like on a pile of books. And my birthday's in August, and I don't think he even looked at it till like
December.
No, it was past that. It was past the New Year, and he was bored one day, and he goes, "When did you get this?" I go, "Oh, I got it for my birthday." He goes, "Your birthday was like 6 months ago." I go, "Yeah, I don't want to switch over to 5th edition." Because we were playing Pathfinder, and my shelves are full of Pathfinder books. And so he started reading it. And then
he goes, I like this one.
He goes, "Oh, this is a good set of rules. We should play this." And I'm like, "No." And then so he kept reading it. And then he's like, "This is really good, Dad. You should check it out." And this was like, 2016?
No, it was before that.
2015. Because it came out in 2014. So this is about 2015, probably close to summer, a good 8 months after the rules have come out. And so he convinced me to read the rules, and I'm like, wow, this is really neat. This is a good set of rules. And now I have a bunch of 5th edition books on my shelf.
So, but the 5th edition rules were easier to learn because you had already had all the other rules for Pathfinder and all the other editions of D&D.
Right. But I think another thing is that they were just better written.
The way that they were written.
And they were, we talked about in another episode, they were streamlined. They cut out a lot of stuff. So it was an easier edition to read and an easier edition to understand. And therefore, it was an easier edition to play.
But it doesn't, not all games in their new editions make the rules easier.
Right.
I'm speaking specifically of Shadowrun.
Right. So 4th edition now we didn't play 4th or 3rd edition. I played 1st and 2nd edition, and it seemed kind of easy. It was kind of complicated, but it wasn't all that difficult. So when Jolene found a old Shadowrun book, and she had never seen it, and she goes, "What's this?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's Shadowrun," and she was kind of enthralled with the background, right? Because you read the back of the book, and I gotta admit that I loved the background, I loved the setting, and I go, "Yeah, sure, you want to play that? I'll run a game for you." So then I happen to look, I go, "Oh, the newest edition is 5th edition." I go, "Oh, 5th edition, the last one I played was 2nd edition. It should be pretty easy." Well, I don't know about easy, but from, let's say, I remember again, I didn't play 3rd or 4th edition, so the jump from 1st and 2nd edition to Shadowrun to 5th edition was a leap of
magnitude,
yes,
great proportions.
Of great proportions.
In fact, Augustine said the other night when asked, "How long did it take you to figure out the rules for Shadowrun 5th edition?"
What did he say, a year?
He said, "It took Alan and I a year of reading the book and playing the game to figure out all the rules." So it's one of those games where, because he knows the rules, I've read them and I've been very confused by them. I've read them several times. And my friend and I were talking about it the other night because we were in a Shadowrun game and we were trying to figure out the combat and stuff.
Magic, wasn't it?
Well, it was before the magic.
Oh.
But then when we got to the magic, his head exploded. So, but the good thing is that once you do figure it out, it makes sense. But it takes a long time to figure it out. For me, it took people explaining it to me over and over again,
yes,
because there's so many different things you have, so many aspects in combat or using magic, and the guns. It's like going back to charts because the guns have so many different.
I think it's just there's a rule for everything.
Yes,
and I think that really when you go into that kind of mode as in a game, it's really tough to remember all that information. So unfortunately for Shadowrun 5th edition, it's a game that a lot of people, you can't really just remember everything in their brain, and they have to look things up in the book, and that book is 500 pages. So for me, that is a terrible example of a game to learn.
Well, this is the whole reason this episode was sparked, because my friend Mike was trying to figure out, he goes, "How long should it take you to learn a rules, right?" So I'm like going, well, with Shadowrun, the good thing about the time that we live in is that, and I showed him there's I forget the guy's name, but on YouTube, there's a guy who has all of so I'll put it in the notes for you if you need it, has all these little stick figure drawings and explains the rules and for 5th edition and how to do everything.
Right.
And that helped me because being a magic user for my first character, I had to figure out all that stuff. And Saul was like, "I'm not sure, you'll have to ask, somebody." So, so I did. I asked YouTube, and I found this guy who showed me all the different things you needed to know about casting a spell in Shadowrun.
I would say that was not a good set of rules, right? Because it's just really a burden to learn. And I'm not sure if it's because the way it's written, but I think it's just it's just too much. It's a huge set of rules, and there's a rule for everything, and there's a lot to take in, and there's a lot to remember, and it's just a lot to remember. So I probably wouldn't want a brand new player to learn to play a game of
with that
Shadowrun.
much, with that,
Right.
with that much rules,
That's like-
without a streamlined cheat sheet or something. for them.
Yes, and that's like Pathfinder, right? I wouldn't suggest somebody who's new to the hobby, but it was done, right? People new to the hobby started learning Pathfinder. My son, he started learning Pathfinder when he was a baby or a little boy, and it triggered in my, he's a math head, so he likes math. He likes, he's taking advanced calculus in high school or whatever, and it's not a big deal, and he likes that whole calculation stuff. But still, I think most people are not like that, and so when you come up with these big tome of rules, and sometimes they're, I've had that problem with Shadowrun where I read the combat section 5 times. I'm like, man, I just cannot wrap my head around what this thing is saying. And I'm not sure if it was my own inability to understand, or if the rules were written a certain way that I couldn't understand them, or a combination of both.
But if you really like the setting, your friends really want to play the game,
Right.
then, and the setting is really, really cool. So you take the hit of trying to figure out the rules, right?
And you learn them.
Because you wanna play in it. But should it be that difficult? My friend Mike was saying it's really, really hard to wrap your head around this and figure it out. And I'm like, well, they really like the game, so we kind of have to, right?
Yes.
Because this is what they want to play, and it's a really cool game, and I like the setting. So for that particular rule set, you're gonna take the time to do it, good, bad, or ugly, just because your friends want to play it.
Yes. So I this is a totally not planned question or anything, and I'm surprised, Jolene. So would you play Shadowrun, the game world, if it was like a 5th edition iteration?
Oh yeah, like
you would?
You mean 5th edition D&D?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Using that set of rules, but playing Shadowrun.
Yeah, but I don't know, because it's not quite as complicated. Would you be able to do all the things? I think you would need more like Pathfinder rules, right?
I don't know,
because everything has a die component to
yes,
it,
I see
right?
what you're saying. So probably learning to play a game, Shadowrun isn't the top of the list of easiest ones to learn, right? And 5th edition does a good job of being streamlined and compared to other editions and stuff. So I think,
But doesn't Shadowrun have one of those even easier streamlined
Yeah.
set of rules? I forget
It's
what it
called
was
Anarchy.
called. Anarchy, yeah.
I don't know how streamlined that is.
I don't
I was
either.
tempted to buy it because after I delved into 5th edition Shadowrun, I was like, man, this book is huge and complicated. And but it was like, what was it? It was too late.
Well, and the boys had already started
right.
reading the book, so
And my friend had bought the book. And, so
and when 3 teenage boys who love to read rules and figure stuff out want to do it, then you're kind of stuck because that's what they want.
like I said, in the golden era of RPGs, Shadowrun 5th edition kind of bucks that trend, and that's fine. There's people who love that system and stuff. They come out with a 6th edition. Now I haven't bought 6th edition. I don't really want to buy 6th edition because I'm not sure if it
Changes anything
much easier, or just changes things and makes it even more complicated for me. Rules, learning a new set of rules is greatly made simpler by the system that is being used, and is made simpler or easier, I should say, by people who know how to write rules. I would say 5th edition is a very good example of a well-written system, and because the 5th edition is done well, you look at the sales of.
You're talking about D&D now.
D&D 5th edition. So D&D 5th edition is done well because of its lower barrier of entry. Now, other people will say, well, there's a lot of other mitigating circumstances why 5th edition D&D has done so well, and it has to do with Critical Role, all these actual plays that are out there people can consume and look at these people. And in fact, we was watching a video where people were saying that it's so popular because of actual plays, right? That has had a big deal, and they can see themselves, or they can see regular people playing this game. They're not like these nerdy guys in a basement. There's women, there's people.
Well, they are the nerdy guys in the basement. They're just older now. And I think one of the main things they were talking about was the fact that one of the reasons the game is so popular now is because all of those guys who've been playing like you since the 70s
Yes.
have brought their ideas to make it a better. It's always been a good game, right? It's always been good for you to play it
Right.
and socialize and everything. But now people are seeing it played and stuff like that, so it makes it a little bit more user friendly.
Right. And people always have this idea of what a gamer who plays D&D looks like, right? And like Jolene said, they're in a basement. I hate to say it.
We literally were. We did that.
Well, yeah,
as
but
teenagers,
well,
you didn't have a basement. I
No,
don't think.
no. Well, the Blakes had a basement.
Oh, there. You did play in a basement.
Yeah, very little. I didn't get to play over there very often, but yes, I think we did do that. But what is important is that people are able to see that normal people play. That this idea of a stereotypical 5 or 6 white guys, socially awkward, playing in a basement or in grandma's basement or whatever, and that's not simply not true anymore. I mean, regular people play regular people. Even I say regular people, but everyday people play D&D, and they come from all different walks of life, and they're women, they're people of color. It's different than the stereotypical view.
Well, I think that the stereotypical view has had to change because those teenage boys grew up, and
Right.
teenage girls grew up, and they had kids, and they wanted to pass on the hobby to them. So, now as those people got older and became more, I don't want to say normal because they were normal to start with. Just people stopped looking at them like they were total geeks.
Well,
right?
yeah, there's that angle why D&D has been so well received, but also because the book is just an easier set of rules to read and to understand, and that is why another reason why it's so popular. And I think other people who make games see D&D 5th edition and they go, "Wow, that's really popular." I see if we write a good set of rules to start off with, and we lower that barrier of entry for new players, because they were talking about half of the new players to 5th edition D&D had never played D&D or had never played any role-playing game, and that's huge, right?
Well, I think it not only D&D, but if you think about all the indie games that have been coming up through the years, that has a lot of that influenced the way that the D&D writers or Wizards of the Coast wrote the new rules for 5th edition.
Definitely.
So all of those ideas that have been coming through the gaming community for years, especially with the indie games and I don't know,
Like Fate
and Tales from the Loop and all those different kinds of games,
Right.
where they have streamlined everything to make it easier and, as you call it, an easier way to enter the game.
Yeah. So we're lucky in the sense that we have all these games out there that are well written, and people work and hone their talents to write clearly and be able to convey what the rules are without being too wordy, without being confusing, and that's only helpful. So when you sit down and try to learn a new RPG, that barrier of entry is a little less. That really complicated set of rules are usually not there as much. They're better written, and when you sit down and start reading a new book, it's super easy. For example, when I sat down and read Tales from the Loop, I was like, man, this is really neat. This is really cool. And how much I needed to figure out to play the game was minimal, and to the point where, I've talked about in the past, it was the only RPG that I felt comfortable having people make characters at the table at a convention. You sit down, I have a...
Because it wasn't going to be too time consuming.
Right. I could sit down at a table with 6 strangers and say, we're going to make characters, and hand out the templates for the characters, and boom, and make characters. Tales from the Loop was the game that I felt comfortable enough, and I had already owned that game for a few months, that I could make characters at a game con.
And when he decides to speak in English, it'll start again.
Yeah, so I was really comfortable with Tales from the Loop, so much so that, like I said earlier, is that I was willing to make characters at a game con table, which I had never done before. mainly because I was running space opera, and that would be too difficult. But I hadn't even thought about it for any other game,
It's the first game that you can actually that you felt that you could do it in the time constraints that you had,
which is about 15 minutes.
Yeah,
I think I would want to spend no more than 15 minutes. I would want to spend to make characters at a gaming table at a game con, because you're so limited on time. Which brings up Free League. Free League is a new publishing company now, and they're pretty amazing. They have a knack, or they have people who write games that are super easy to understand. The systems are really streamlined, and I think most of the games that they publish, you would be able to pick up and read and make characters and understand the rules pretty quickly.
Tales from the Loop. I know that they also do the Alien game.
Alien, yes.
And what's another one?
Coriolis, Mutant Year Zero.
And the way that they do it, though, is the rules system is basically the same, but they adjust things, right? Like how you use your dice to put stuff together.
Yes. So they use dice pools, and it's basically an attribute plus your skill. You add those two numbers, and you throw that many 6-sided dice, and if you get a 6, you succeed.
And one of the other elements that they have is there's always in those games, Alien, it was stress. Was it stress?
Panic mechanic.
Panic mechanic.
Yeah, right.
So Tales of the Loop has something similar, where if you
fail,
then you're going to take a condition.
If you want to.
Yeah. So different things happen, but all the rules kind of have the same kind of thing. So once you learn one, then it's going to be easier to learn the rules for another system.
I was going to mention also, like, another game company that does rules really well, and they're working with an easy set of rules is
Evil Hat.
Right. So they make Fate Core, which is not a super simple game. It's a little bit more complicated, but they did come out with Fate Accelerated, and Fate Accelerated is really a streamlined game, and that would be real easy to make characters at a table, and boom, start play within 10 minutes. And the rules are super easy to understand. I mean, they just are. Another aspect you were talking about making a game easier to understand and easier to pick up is using the same system, right? Like 5th edition D&D now has open gaming license, and so other people are making 5th edition using
different genres.
Different games using the 5th edition game mechanic. And so when you have that open gaming mechanic and you can port over the system to another genre and a totally different game, but you know how the system works already, it does make it easier to learn.
So that makes it easier to learn the rules if it's the same publisher and they have the same kind of system, or if mechanic. They have an open license.
There's quite a few companies. You're mentioning earlier today was the 2D20 system by Modifius. Now they have different iterations each game. They don't have like a core mechanic or a core set of rules. What they do have is this mechanic, the 2D20 system, and they tweak it for every game. Whoever makes the game, for, like, let's say Conan, is probably the more crunchier one. There's another science fiction one called Infinity that's really crunchy, and then on the other side of the spectrum you have John Carter of Mars
and Star Trek
Adventures. And so you look at the different games in that system, using that same system, and they run from, like I said, from Conan to Infinity to Star Trek, which is a little bit easier to understand, and then you have let's say
John Carter of Mars,
and also another game called Dishonored, which is based on a video game, and that's how they're spread from really crunchy to really easy. But you understand the core mechanic, so when you open up that book, whichever book it is, as long as it's a 2D20 system and you've already played that one, you already understand how the game mechanic works.
And both like Star Trek and Conan, you have it's 2D20s that you're rolling, and then you have these dice pools of things that you can. They call them, what is it when you have extras?
Well, they call them different things, but but you generate momentum.
Momentum. Yeah.
And that gives you a dice pool of D20s that you can add to your roll if you need to.
And it's a really cool mechanic for those games because you can share that dice pool with all the people at the table.
Right.
So once you learn the rules for that and you know how to play Star Trek, and then they give you Conan, it's a little more crunchy, but you can figure out what you're supposed to be rolling for, and you know that you have these extra dice. But the problem with those games is that when you use those dice pools or you want to do extra things, then the GM gets their own little dice pool of either, what was it? It's like chaos or something.
In Conan, it's called Doom. And I forget what it's called in other games, but that Doom is pretty cool. And so basically, it gives the GM a chip that they can do to mess with the characters, just complicate the lives of the characters in the game.
So that kind of makes it easier learning the rules.
Right.
Once you've learned one set of rules, then you can just figure out, what the differences are.
Right. The little quirks about each different setting has its own little rules. Another game like that is Savage Worlds, right? Savage Worlds is basically just a game. There's no setting.
It's a system.
It's a system, right? It's a game RPG system. And you buy other games that are settings, like Deadlands is a setting for Savage Worlds. Airships and Pirate. Another one that one of my friends that I know on Facebook is actually play with him is Scott Woodard. He made Flash Gordon. When you play Flash Gordon and you've already played Deadlands, you already understand the game. I think that is really neat. A good idea for making games easier to understand.
And making it easier to learn the rules.
Right.
Because once you know the system, then you can...
And there's other systems out there that are trying to do things. Genesis uses the funky dice system from Star Wars. I don't know how popular that system is. I know some people really like it, but I don't think it's as widespread as, let's say, Savage Worlds or as popular as Savage Worlds. That's what I'm saying. Well, if you have that going for you, if you already know Savage Worlds and you're trying to learn Flash Gordon, then you already know how to play the game. The only thing you're dealing with is they call them setting rules, right? What is the rules in this setting? Whether you have,
how's it different from the other settings?
Right? Whether it has lasers and that's just setting material, right? That's like window dressing. That's how it looks. That's not, the mechanic is still the same, from a punch to shooting a gun, a ray gun, or a blaster, or a shotgun. It's all handled the same way, so you already know the system. All you have to do is learn what setting you're in, and that makes it easier to learn a game and to learn how to play.
So basically, you learn the system rules for some games, and then you can just change the settings.
Correct, and I think that's a really interesting way of looking at making a RPG. And I think when Savage Worlds came about, it was there was a certain way they wanted their RPGs to go, which their tagline was fast and furious fun, right? They wanted a game you can get into fast, meaning that the rules couldn't be super complicated. The furious, it was like super fast paced. You weren't stuck in the rules too much, and hopefully fun, right? Which is
all I have to say about that is that you have to have a really good GM for Savage Worlds, because they have to tell you what the constraints are of what you can pick for your characters and the setting. I think the settings helped you to do that.
Yes, that's exactly what settings do.
But if you're looking at the rules, there's so many choices and different things that it's kind of crazy. So you would need somebody who knew what they were doing to help to explain it to you.
Well, Savage Worlds does this like generic type of stuff, right? Something GURPS try to do. Right, but GURPS is much more crunchier system. GURPS is just rules, and it doesn't have an implied setting or anything. So it has rules for like computer programming, and then it has rules. Let's say a skill. It tells you how you buy that skill, how the skill works, what the skill does, and stuff. And then you have computer programming. Then you have swordsmanship.
They don't go together, by the way.
So they may go together, right? You might be playing in, what is it? A space opera world.
That's true.
World where people are a Baroque space opera where people are dukes and duchesses and carry swords and stuff like that. And okay, There's a ghost. Usually in GURPS, the person who's running the game goes, "Oh, yeah, there's
You're not using those.
Yeah, I'm not. So you have to pick and choose what is allowed and what isn't allowed, depending on what type of game you're running. Like if you're running a medieval fantasy game, you can't take computer programming. I wouldn't even allow the player to take computer programming, but you could be a real smartass and say, well, you could take computer programming, but it's not
going to do you any good.
It's just losing point. In that sense, yes, GURPS is a little bit more crunchier system because it tries to be more realistic.
So if people are new to role-playing games, there are newer role-playing games that are like really easy and only have like 10 pages of rules. I'm thinking of Liminal, which we just learned.
Right.
And well, it was easier for me to learn since a bunch of GMs were reading the rules, and they go, oh, and they're discussing it, right, with each other about what it means. But it's pretty easy to understand even for me. I even found the combat before Saul could to figure out what you were supposed to do. So that makes it, when the rules are easy like that, some people might say they're too easy, but I think that it just makes it a little bit easier to learn the system, right?
Oh, definitely.
When you don't have to look up 20 things to know what you're doing for combat, when you just have to, when it says, oh, there's an opposing roll, and you go, oh, okay, there's an opposing roll, so that makes it a little bit easier. And what are you rolling? And it tells you right there.
2d6.
Yes.
Yeah, I was really surprised at how much I liked it, because I go, well, it might be too streamlined, it might be too simple, but there's just enough crunch for certain people that they can know, they can
tweak their character the way they want
with the traits, right? So that is an example of a game and a system and an author who has a lot of RPG experience. I'm guessing. I don't know. I don't know the person. I don't know him personally. Paul Mitchner, who created the game. I don't know how much experience in role-playing game he has, whether it's like me, he's been playing since he was 10, or he just started playing 5 years ago. But the guy knows how to write, and he knows how to write clearly, and his endeavor was to write a simpler game, and he totally succeeded. So when I start learning the rules of a new RPG, I gotta read the rules, right? Everybody does.
Right.
The second thing I do is make a character right away.
Because that helps you learn the rules.
Right, it does. And so when you're learning how to make a character, or you're making a character, you're figuring how things work. And then soon after that, I'll make at least 2 characters, and then I'll have like a mock battle between them. And then you learn the task resolution system, and then you really see how the whole system works. And once you've done that, then you just answer the questions that come up with when you're doing all those 3 things.
I haven't done any of those things. I usually find a YouTube video to watch to see, because somebody else is reading the rules so I can read it. And if I don't understand it, I find somebody to explain it to me.
There's that.
That's my way of learning the rules, but I wouldn't suggest that. If you're going to run the game, then you need to do what Saul's doing.
Yes, you could watch a video, but I would wait to watch a video on other people's opinions on how things work until after you read the rules. At least read the rules and make a character. Making a character should be... I remember when I was a kid and first got Space Opera, that's all I did, because nobody had played before, and I was going to GM, and so I was just making characters, and I must have made 50 characters before we even started playing. So I think it's very critical to you, for as a new player or as a new game you're getting into, is to make a character, because it really unravels how everything works. Even if you make a crappy character, I mean, like, oh man, why did I pick this skill or that doesn't work well? You learn from that, and then you go, oh, okay, so that doesn't work so good. But you make another character, and you're like, oh yeah, this guy's more competent, or this character is more competent.
Well, and most of the rules for RPGs, that's one of the main things, is creating the character, right? And as you create the character, you learn what all the skills are and what the people can do and stuff. And that helps you to understand, because when you get to the combat mechanism, or, you have to learn what the genre is, and then you have to learn how to do the character. But in the process of doing that, you're going to learn the rules, right?
Yes.
But then you're not going to learn all the rules, because you're always going to sit down because somebody else is reading them and doing their thing, making their character and looking at the stuff, and they're going to read it, interpret it differently than the way that you did.
That does happen, yes. And you might get into a little discussion as to what a rule means. And hopefully that doesn't happen too often. That just happens when rules are unclear. But like I said, I think most new games are much better written than they were 30 years ago, to even 10 years ago. Look at D&D 5th edition. It's a much better set of rules, written rules, more sense. It's clearer than AD&D was in 3rd edition or any previous
And since
edition.
these are RPGs and you're playing with other people, most of the time you're going to sit down and whoever's GMing or something, they might not like one of the rules and they might tweak it a little bit, right? Unless
Yes,
they're
that
those
happens.
rules as written people that have to have everything exactly the way that it states it in the book.
Yeah, I would refrain from trying to change or monkey around with the rules before you even start playing, or as right at the beginning.
Mostly they've done that though once they've played and they
Yes, I
figure out
agree.
that it doesn't work.
Right, or they don't like it.
They don't like the way
Right.
that it works.
But a lot of times it just play with the way the rules are written. That way, you could see or you get a sense of how the game creator wanted the rules to be interpreted and played, and just test it out. If there's something you don't like, you could always toss it out later. But I think
But if you're playing with a group and they've already changed the rules, then, you're going to have to go with that
Well, there's that.
because you're sitting at a table with people that didn't like that rule that you thought was really cool.
you can fight for that rule.
Well, and sometimes it goes, we've seen the gambit of the way that rules are, right? There's the
Yes.
old rules that we've figured out, and then there's Shadowrun, which was new rules, but it was like the old crunchy rules, right?
Yes.
So a bunch of older GMs looking at it going, I'm not sure what that means, and then discussing it with each other and figuring it out, right? Versus picking up Liminal, where it's like 10 pages of rules and the rest is character setting and all
Yes.
that kind of stuff. And it was pretty easy to figure out. But even then, there were questions on, because most of the guys I play with are GMs, right? So they have questions, they've read it and they go, I wanted to know how this works. I'm thinking, what do you think? Right? So you figure it out with your friends how to do it. So it might take a little longer if you're playing Shadowrun. You'll definitely need some time to figure it out.
We ran across this when we were playing Traveler, right? We play every Friday, and we rotate GMs and we rotate games because of that. And one of our friends wanted to run Traveler, and we're like, okay, Jolene had never made a Traveler character, and it had been literally 30 years since I made one. And in fact, I sold my books.
It's not a pleasant experience, by the way.
Some people love that. I sold my little box of books years ago, because I just never thought I'd ever play it. And I bought the PDF of the little 3-back books, and I just said, "Oh, read the rules. It should be easy." And they were reading the rules, and they were having a tough time making the character. And I remember reading, and I read the rules again. I was looking at it going, man, I don't understand. I was having a hard time understanding what these rules were trying to tell me what to do. And even after we made the characters and we were playing, I forgot what rule was.
I don't know what the rule was, but I remember Felipe walked away from, because we were playing on Zoom. He walked away and we're going, I'm not sure what this rule is. And when he came back, he goes, this is the way we do this rule. And everybody goes, okay, because, it was Felipe. He's the GM. He wasn't the GM in the game, but he's run it, right? And he said, this is what we did then, and this is what we're going to do now. And Philip went, okay. And then we looked it up and discovered that people are still arguing about this.
Yes, there was they wanted clarity on this rule, and basically the two ways of interpreting were the two ways that
they were trying to interpret. There's two interpretations.
Two different camps that argue both sides. I'm like, oh my god! And it would have been nice if Mark Miller would just say, "Oh no, this is what it meant."
But that's the joys of a role playing game, right? You're figuring it out as you go, right? And you figure it out one way, someone else figures out another way.
Figured out that joy, but yeah, there's some people who love that stuff. So I think, like I said in the beginning, we're lucky in this golden age of RPGs where there's a lot of years of material out there that you can learn from, and hopefully new writers, whether they're old fogies in their 70s who decide to make a new game, or new people new to the hobby who want to run a game, they can look back at all these rules and say, oh, okay, and see what works for them and what doesn't work, what seems clear and what doesn't seem clear. Another thing is play testing. You can give out your quick start set of rules or your basic rules and see, and people can play with it and play test it and give you feedback, hopefully positive feedback or just feedback, constructive feedback, I guess would be a good word. And you could utilize that to tweak your rules. Like I said, there's a lot of games out there. There's a lot of games that are real interesting, and we can pick up a game nowadays and read it, make a character, and be playing within a short time.
There you go. Good luck learning your rules. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
You have a good day.